So what did the founders actually think about Christianity and religion and morality and all that kind of stuff in government? Well, George Washington worked out the treaty with Tripoli. It was signed into law by John Adams in 1797. And it reads, and I quote, "As the government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, and has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims, and as the same states never have entered into any war or act of hostility against any Mohammedan nation, it is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries." But the founders realized that this wasn't just an issue of being Christians or not. They wanted to prevent warlords from coming to power in the United States. Keep in mind, you know, Jefferson back in the day talked about the three kinds of tyranny. Tyranny by the rich, that's feudalism or fascism or oligarchy. Tyranny by warlords, that's, you know, strongman government. And tyranny by churches. It's the priests taking over. Those were the three tyrannies that he feared. And so he didn't want to, the way that they stopped the warlords from taking control of the United States is by making the commander-in-chief of the armed services a civilian, the president, and taking away from the president, the second Article II branch of government, taking away from the president the power to make war and giving it exclusively to Congress, the Article I branch, the first among equals. The group that gets, that 100% of the members of the House of Representatives are up for re-election every 2 years, 100% of the Senate every 6 years. 30%, you know, about a third of the Senate is up for re-election in any given election cycle. So by doing that, they eliminated the possibility of a president being responsible for perpetual war, and, you know, which is a good thing. I mean, James Madison said about perpetual wars that in war, the discretionary power of the executive, the president, is extended. His influence in dealing out offices, honors, and emoluments is multiplied, and all the means of seducing the minds are added to those of subduing the force of the people. The same malignant aspect in republicanism may be traced to the inequality of fortunes and the opportunities of fraud growing out of a state of war, and in the degeneracy of manners and morals engendered by both. No nation can preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. But I think one of the most important quotes is, since we're talking about Madison, and just one more Madison thing, James Madison's first official veto was striking down a law that gave money. The federal government had been running poorhouses through the George Washington presidency, through the John Adams presidency, through the Thomas Jefferson presidency, and now you've got James Madison as president. And the religious folks in Congress came forward and said, you know, instead of the federal government administering the poorhouse, we should give this money to the churches and let the churches run the poorhouse. And they actually passed that through Congress, the House and the Senate. And James Madison vetoed it. And his veto message says, and I quote, "Because the bill gives the church an authority to provide for the support of the poor and the educated of poor children of the same, this would be a precedent for giving to religious societies a legal agency, a legal responsibility, a legal ability to carry into effect a public and civil duty." In other words, Madison didn't want churches anywhere near educating or caring for poor people. But, you know, one of the most interesting is Jefferson saying, "I've sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny imposed upon the mind of man." It's actually from a letter to an old friend of his, Benjamin Rush. And he says, "Dear sir, I promised you a letter on Christianity, which I have not forgotten. I do not know that it would reconcile the genus irritable vetum," that's the angry priests, "who are all in arms against me. Their hostility is on too interesting a ground to be softened. The delusion on the cause of the Constitution, which while it secured the freedom of the press, also covered the freedom of religion, has given the clergy a very favorite hope of obtaining an establishment of a particular form of Christianity in the United States. The returning good sense of our country, he's talking about the possibility that he himself could be elected president in 1800. The returning good sense of our country threatens abortion to their hopes, and the preachers believe that any portion of power confided to me, such as being elected president, will be exerted in opposition to their schemes. And they believe rightly, for I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of men. And this is all they have to fear for me, but enough, too, in their opinion. Thomas Jefferson laying it out. And when he was talking about the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, in his diary, again, he talks about how they tried to change the wording. He says, where the preamble to the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom declares that coercion is a departure from the plan of the holy author of our religion, an amendment was proposed by inserting the words Jesus Christ. The insertion was rejected by a great majority in proof that they meant to comprehend the Jew, the Gentile, the Christian, the Mohammedan, and the Hindu.